Welcome again, everyone, to this podcast. So, P3, I'm with Kailash Upadhyay. I'm your host, and today we are diving deep into a topic that will resonate with every portfolio manager out there. This topic is from chaos to control and how to handle the disrupted portfolio. And friends, in today's volatile business environment, disruption is inevitable. We have market disruption, we have geopolitical shift, we have unexpected operational challenges. And the question today is not that whether disruption will occur, but how we manage them. And to share the insight and to help us navigate the solution to disruption, I have a guest today, and my guest today is Thomas Walenta. Thomas has a very extraordinary career in project management, program management, portfolio management, which is spanning several decades and several industries. And I think so. Thomas has started his career as an IBMer in 1974. Thomas is a PMI fellow. He, of course, certified PMP, PGMP, and he was also a president of PMI Frankfurt chapter. He was a member of PMI, the Ethics Review Committee, and Thomas was also held a position in the PMI board with 50 years of international speaking experience. So what I can tell you that from boardroom to breakout session, Thomas has, always showed us how experience drives excellence. So without delaying this further, I want to welcome to Thomas Walenta. Hi, Thomas. Welcome to this podcast. So,
hello, Kailash. I'm very excited that I am invited to your program here and can share some of my experiences and hopefully can enrich the knowledge of our audience.
Awesome, Thomas. Absolutely. And I'm sure that the project, program, and portfolio management community will have so much to learn from your experience, so much of experience you bring in this P3M community. So, Thomas, let's start the first segment of this podcast. And in this, we will be setting the stage. I want to ask you in this segment, Thomas, what are some common disruptions you have observed in industry you have worked? How do these disruptions affect the organizational performance, Thomas?
Well, Kailash, let me first say some words about the general topic of portfolio management, the terms we are touching, and also what I have done in the past 10 years or so. So I wrote a book chapter on portfolio management value for a German book, but that's okay. It was published also. I read several articles and gave keynotes on portfolio management seminars in the Poland chapter, for instance. And I also had the opportunity to have a very high-level portfolio management implementation at a customer of mine, which took about a year to implement and was very successful in the terms. I will talk about this because this customer, he experienced some disruptions, and he replied to these disruptions with one big implementation of portfolio management, but also with some other stuff. You have to do some things. So looking at what a portfolio is, it is defined in the standards of PMI or IPMA or you name it, ISO. But, this is when you are aware of portfolio management. I say every organization, every company, every NGO is doing portfolio management if they know it or not. Because if you select the work to do, and you select some work not to do, and you assign resources and you check it and you go in cycles and reviewing what you are doing. If it's worthwhile, then you are doing portfolio management.
Absolutely correct, Thomas. Yeah.
And very often, I saw in many smaller companies and that the CEO, the owner is saying, okay, we do this and that. And so he makes decisions, but not based on big data or not based on, let's say, a process, but on his gut feelings, on his intuition. So it's very well, that maybe intuition in some cases is better, has better outcomes, better benefits than you have built up a system or using a software and using it without thinking deeply what you are doing. Then you may have even worse results. That's one of the observations I have. So this company I'm talking about, was really having a vague process about whether you select something. It was actually attached to their annual financial planning.
Yeah.
So every company is having, they have to do annual reporting, and though they plan for the next year. And then, they, in this plan, they decide what they want to do next year, also in terms of projects. It's sometimes a major topic. And what happens to them, they found out that while they planned maybe in August for the next year, then when they reached January, something's changed. And when they reached August next year again, a whole thing was changing. It was not really the portfolio they selected a year ago. So it was a very long time period where they had fixed something which was in reality not fixed. Maybe, and then intuition came in, and then the CEO said, but we have this problem, we have to do this and that project. And then they kill the other project. And then the people, the project managers, portfolio managers, CIO, they try to catch up with the situation.
Yeah.
And they try to say, okay, what to do? And what really happened was a big disruption for them. The people working on projects, they were working on something, and suddenly somebody said, oh, I changed my mind, we do something else, And first, they try to do both, the new thing and the old thing, and then they deselect the old project, but, then 2 weeks later, another priority change comes around the corner. So this is a big problem for people because they get fed up. They invest a lot of their private time and then trying to do the right things, and then management changes direction. And this leads to burnout, this leads to dissatisfaction, and in the end, to attrition. What they really saw happening, a big disruption, people are leaving the company.
Yeah.
But they couldn't stand it any longer.
Yeah.
So this was, I would say, the second big thing that was angering them as a disruption. The first was that they planned for something, and then reality caught up with them, and they had to change something else. This company really did also not fulfill the expectations of management, because management said, okay, we want to do this and this and this and that. Why does the IT organization of about 100 people, why can't you do that? And the IT said, okay, we have too few people, and we can not the skills for this and that. We don't want to let it give it to consultants and so on. So we hire external people. You can do that, and they had about 50 external people. But then for every external consultant, project manager, whatever, you have at least talk to them once a week and see what they're doing. So you need project management skills.
Absolutely.
To get them on board, to align them, and to somehow steer them. So this was also disruptive, because if you have 100 people and 50 plus 50 external consultants, it gets messy in terms of communication, in terms of what can the externals do, what not. So what they did is they said, okay, let's have a look at our work. And actually, that's what you're doing in portfolio management. You look at the work and try to structure and try to prioritize it. And they said a lot of our work is actually maintaining old systems, or, answering to bugs that come up, or answering to questions. So it was what is commonly called application maintenance.
Yes.
And so one decision they took is to outsource application maintenance, and actually to India. What we Germans tend to do, we look for an Indian company. There was a competition, and in the end, HP in India was awarded, and they had an excellent onboarding process. So the onboarding process to take over an application landscape that was not well documented, but had a lot of problems internally, and to take it over by a remote team, which was built up in Delhi, I think then being able that this team gets up to speed and gets all the knowledge and gets the information they need to maintain the system, it only took 9 months. It was very good, and they had a good system.
Okay.
And a process to take it over. And the process was partly, that some of the Indians came here and they shadowed the Germans, and then so after 1 or 2 weeks, then they said, okay, I'll take it, and I have 90% of the activities I'm aware of. So they learned not to analyze the system so much, but to watch what the Germans are doing in this field.
Got it. Yeah.
That's a different thing. So this is freeing up resources to work on projects on the portfolio.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's one point. We were talking about the work, going to select and somehow. And the first thing, if you want to select work, you have to be clear on what kind of selection criteria you use.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I think we developed after a long discussion of 5 criteria, because he said the more criteria, the more vague does it get. So you have to be very clear what is there. And certainly one of the criteria was the ROI of the intended project initiative. But how to find out the ROI in advance? That's the big problem, because they were not used to develop business cases. And if they were, the business cases were developed in different ways. So one thing you have to do is to have a short, small business case intended to show the criteria you want to use for selection. And that was a task to standardize and to give it out to whom? To the requesters of the IT project, which were business people.
Right.
So this company had a CEO suite, a C-suite of 5 people, C-suite, and then about 20 divisions. So in the room, if you talk about, doing projects, so in the room were about 30 people, and they made basically the portfolio decision based on this criteria. And they had to understand and agree on these criteria upfront. And that's what they had to provide the business cases before that. And this was a major task that took maybe, if you think about 20 people, in 20 divisions, half a year was quite quick to do it. But it was done.
Yes. Thomas, I just want to share that you rightly explained the portfolio and the some common chaos which the leadership chaos or the the policy chaos which can lead to big disruption in achieving the portfolio success. And see, Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong. Portfolio management is all about implementing the organization strategy and ensuring that we able to achieve the organization goals and objectives through the portfolio initiative. And every time organization creates strategy, they always wants to be successful, but not every strategy always be successful, right? Even if you see the US election which recently happened, even the other party who not able to win the election, but they had their own strategy. And you rightly said that because of too frequently changing their own stance. I think this is what I have understood from your discussion, that what are the common chaos? This could be because of frequently changing their own tactical steps, and that could lead to the overall strategic failure. That could lead to the chaos into the entire portfolio, and that is what I have also seen. This is just a recent example which I have seen. I'm not sure that how correct I am, but when I have closely observed the US election, I have realized that there were frequent change in the tactical aspect of implementing the strategy, and maybe the lack of communication also between the different internal team. Do you agree with that, Thomas? That many a time everybody wants to be successful into their strategy implementation and through the portfolio management, but these are the great point which you have mentioned. We need to stick to our strategy, and you rightly said either work with your internal team or maybe work with your consultant, work with the PMO, and ensure that we take the corrective and preventive actions as soon as possible, so that we can have, because we need to control the chaos. And if we are not able to control the chaos, then there is a problem to achieve the organizational strategy and the objective. Is that correct, Thomas?
Well, you said some things, some assumptions, and you are totally correct in saying, this is the situation that is faced by many organizations, by political organizations, by countries, NGOs, and so on. Yes. There is a kind of chaos, and there is a kind of perceived VUCA world. If you
VUCA world,
if you know that. My take on that is, life is chaos. Because if you live, you will. If it's all pre-planned, it's boring.
Exactly. Exactly.
And only if you live your life and you have some disruptions, and some are nice and some are presumably not nice, but can make them nice if you work on it, if you don't despair. So I always compare that with the river. A river is flowing and it might be fast or slow or whatever, and you swim in the river. You know what? This river is chaos, and all the water drops. They cannot control them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you can nevertheless swim and enjoy being in the river and be refreshed and try to adapt more and more. And, if it gets too dangerous, you better get out maybe. But life is a river, and, it's the same in business life.
Absolutely.
So then the other statement you made, and I'm not against you, but there is some, the statement was about portfolio management is a way how to implement a strategy. I don't think so. And I recently read a paper from a researcher in Australia, and he looked at one of the Australian states which implemented the portfolio management, and clearly the research results were portfolio does not at all help with strategy implementation. But what does help is if you have the right programs defined, which implement the change, the transformation that is necessary to reach the strategic goal, Programs are there to reach one strategy goal,
Absolutely.
And if you do that right, then you have a better chance to implement your strategy than if you are following a portfolio management system you've implemented, because that portfolio management system cannot really react to disruptions very well. Yeah. That's why we have chaos.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Thomas. But this is a great discussion. And, I want to just ask another question. Isn't organization drive change through projects and programs? That's wonderful, and a statement. Every time organization wants to drive some tactical initiative, maybe some projects, and every time they want to drive the strategic initiative, they will drive the program initiative.
Yes.
These projects and program part of the portfolio, and it is the portfolio where these program will be identified, program will be prioritized. These are the component of the portfolio. So I can understand that there can be some program which can stay outside the portfolio. But these instances are not too many. What we have learned and what I have an experience that a program selection, even the program steering committee, they are actually nothing but the portfolio review board. It is that portfolio review board which select these multiple programs. Programs are temporary and they over like a project. It has the definite closing stage in their life cycle. And it is in that portfolio review board, which is the portfolio committee, they select these the programs through which they deliver the organization strategy and goal. So ultimately, the portfolio is a bridge between that organization strategy and objective, which is input to portfolio, and the project, program, or subsidiary portfolio and ongoing operations through which this organization strategy and objectives are delivered. Isn't that true, Thomas?
That's one of the applications of portfolio management. You're right. If you look at the whole organization and then you have a portfolio, if you know it or not, you have a portfolio. But think about that. The same portfolio management processes could be applied within a program, must be applied within a program, because you have multiple projects within a program. And the program manager always is also handling his portfolio. He's in charge of, He might stop and initiate projects. He might shorten them, change the scope and charter and so on. He is also a portfolio manager for his realm, What I've seen, if organizations have a portfolio management on the organizational level, even then you have sub-portfolios. So you might have a project and programs on the CEO level, let me put it this way. But then if you have 20 divisions, like in the case I was talking about, you also have 20 portfolios on the division level.
Absolutely. Agree.
Because they have to contribute to the organization level, because there is where integration happens. And then they have also make sure with the rest of the resources and capabilities they have that they fulfill their smaller divisional targets, which also might be huge, by the way. So I think portfolio management is more a tool to be applied, but it's not the way how you can really implant strategy, because the only linkage from strategy to portfolio is by the selection criteria, and mostly it's being done by the way, okay, does it support a strategic goal, this thing or not? And guess what? For many programs that are vital for organizations, like a big transformation into a new market, you don't have a viable business case. You don't know where you will end. You cannot really compare this program within the portfolio with others. So there has to be, again, an intuitive decision making. We do this and we don't know where it will end and we don't know what it will cost, but we have to do it because the market demands it. So now, example, political again. So we have to go out of Russia with our resources.
Yeah.
Many companies from the Western world thought they have to do it. Other companies from China, from India, I don't know, from other companies, they went the other way around,
Yes.
But this was a decision not driven by ROI or by something, but by geopolitical and, let's say, block-oriented constraints you have, and then you go out of Russia, out of the Russian market. Huge transformation for many, huge growth for many.
Yeah.
So again, portfolio management is important, and formal portfolio management is also important, but it is applicable on several levels on that work pyramid. So normally we have portfolio management on top, and I'm not happy with that picture, because you also have portfolio management at least in every program and also in every division, because every division manager, he's in charge of applying the resources to his work. So he has select the work to do, and the overall portfolio gives him some constraints, because the CEO demands 70% of your resources will go into my overarching project or programs. And then he has only 30% of these resources to play with. It's like, the professor that came in and had an empty bar, and they put big stones in it, and he asked the students, is it full? Yes, it is full with big stones. And then he pulled in smaller pebbles, and then in the end, he pulled in sand, and then in the end, he pulled in water. So there is enough small things you can do, and this only can be steered and decided on a very low level. So that's why in the case of my organization, I was dealing with, we developed a 3-tier portfolio management system. So the first tier was a big stones, we put in the jar. That, okay, these are the overarching organizational things, and they might support the strategy, but each of the pebbles has a strategic goal, attached to it. So the whole thing is not strategy. Then the next level was on the divisional level, and they had the 30% of resources, and this was maybe the small pebbles and the sand, they put it there. And then the last level was the teams, and they were really doing portfolio management on a 2-week base, because they saw, okay, how are the projects and programs going? Do we have resources left? And what can we do with that? And we have decision making, or what also very often happens is that one project has to support another project for whatever, because they have the bottleneck resource, because they need to develop something, the other has as an input, and so on. So many things. So we established a bi-weekly board where all projects were present and all resource things, and then they just put a yellow pad to go, I request from you this and that in the next 2 weeks. And that's how we manage on a very, very low level these sand and water pulled into the box. Nevertheless, the big pebbles were reviewed every 6 months, which was much improvement for changing the priorities of the big pebbles. But the priorities of the small things, could change within 2 days.
Awesome. So, Thomas, I think so, these are the great discussions. And now let's shift the gear. Let's go to the segment 2 of this podcast. And in the segment 2, I want to ask you some framework or some strategies that you recommend for realigning the portfolio and controlling the portfolio for, the organizational success. So what are some frameworks? See, we have already discussed some common causes of chaos or disruption in the portfolio, whether it's a strategic shift, whether it's a lack of communication from the top down about what strategy they want to deliver. And we also discussed how projects, program, and portfolio itself help organization to achieve this strategy and objective. But now we know there are the factors that leads to chaos. But what are the framework you like to suggest us that will, realign or regain the control of this, disrupted portfolio, Thomas?
Well, if you see disruptions, if you see things that are not going according to plan, you have to recognize that yes, there is a problem maybe with the process and, with the assessment, but there's always also a problem with the perception of the team, of the people, of the customers, whatever, the humans involved in that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you have to balance both the formal structure, process, logical thing with the perceptions of the people, stakeholder involved, and a good setup to build this kind of bridge between strategy and implementation has been developed by PMI. And it's called the Bright Line Transformation Compass.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you're aware of Bright Line. Bright Line was
yes.
a program within the PMI, and they targeted really the gap between strategy definition and strategy implementation. And they did a lot of work, and one work I really recommend to read. It's not too complicated. It's based on more than 20 years of experience of the professor with transformations. And, there are some 5 key points. One of them is you have to identify what he calls, what the compass calls champions of the transformation. You want to achieve a goal, therefore you need to have a transformation, and then you have people within your team, within your employees, which are champions, which are convinced that's the right thing to do, and they are willing to pursue this goal, and these are not managers necessarily. There might be a manager among them, but these are really the people on the ground from different divisions to integrate the whole thing. So that's one thing. If you don't have these champions, I recommend to build that champion base first. And then if you really go into let's now look at the more logical and the rational thinking, you have to acknowledge that there is a change. Too often, we have these black elephants, though everybody knows there's a problem, but nobody wants to talk about it, and we ignore it and we go along it, like with Corona, it's there, but nobody wants to have it. So we ignore it for some time until it hits us hard. And you have to acknowledge it, and this means that you have to be very aware of the situation. And then you have to see, okay, that's a problem. Now let's assess it. What does it mean, So maybe if you have a problem with your portfolio, you assess the portfolio, you have a health check of the components, and you also review the business cases. Still, we had a selection decision made on some assumptions. Now we review these assumptions and see what is. That's a bottom-up approach, that you come from below and say, okay, 20 big things in our portfolio, and 5 of them change their business case, and then maybe we could review them. And then what's always forgotten, the portfolio manager is not just taking a strategy for granted as an input, there's a big strategy from God or whatever, No. Now that you have assessed the situation, you have to give a feedback to the people who are in charge of the strategy, because the strategy has to change, but it only can change in a meaningful way if it considers the situation you have assessed in your portfolio. Now, if they only look at the external factors that come in, they might not have all the data to make a decision to change strategic goals or invent new strategic goals or whatever, take some action. So you have to understand the changes for strategy, then you have a new strategy, you have a change of strategy, and then you can reassess your portfolio and can make a new selection of things. Most companies don't do that. Most companies don't kill projects. But if I go in and I'm asked, do we have a good portfolio management system? I always ask, how many projects do you kill every half year? And if there is a 0, which is normally the case, then you don't have a good portfolio management system. So it's a KPI, the kill rate of projects.
Right.
Yeah. And for sure, there is this tendency in humans to have this, if we started with something, if we invested something, the sunk cost fallacy we have, but don't ride a dead horse. That's another thing we can remember. So you have a new portfolio, and then you have to reshuffle your resources, your capabilities. You have to see, do I have new bottlenecks? Are the old bottlenecks still bottlenecks? I always say if you start resource management in a portfolio, that's the last thing you do. That's because it's really complicated to do that. It can be very messy. If you have, 150 people and they should work every day, and you try really to assign them the task every day, that's not the task of the portfolio manager. In general, he should support projects to do that. I always recommend for the portfolio manager to start with the bottlenecks. Normally, 1-2% of the population are the bottlenecks. The people which are asked to be in every project. And the skills that are rare in the company. And if you can get the workload off the bottlenecks, you are freeing up their time for meaningful stuff, for planned stuff. Otherwise, they are sitting there, they are called by their friends, and they are doing something, but not what is important for the organization. So first deal with bottlenecks. If you look at resources, then you can make a huge impact and have that. And the fifth thing, is that once you have overcome the situation, you grow your resilience, you grow your capability to withstand any future disruptions. And everybody talks about resilience, but not many people know what it is, and how they should achieve it.
Absolutely.
So I found a very simple model in Harvard Business Review by one of the leaders of Boston Consulting Group, and he wrote a paper with somebody about resilience. So actually, they looked at biology. So how are plants, how are humans, animals, how are they resilient? What are the characteristics? And they had six characteristics for resilience. And I think this is something, if you read that paper, it's very Harvard Business Review, I think 2015 or whatever. And so there are three structural criteria. So the first is you have to be redundant. If you only have one provider of something, you are not redundant. You have to have two choice, even if the second choice is more expand. But if the Suez Canal goes down and you only route to Europe for your shipments, it's Suez Canal, whatever. So you have to be redundant. You have to be modular. So being redundant is nice, but being modular is supporting it, because then you can exchange modules. If one of my model of my tasks is shipment to Europe, and then one module is by ship, by train, by whatever, and then you are modular. And it's much more easy to respond to changes in one of these modules, and exchange the model or do it. And these modules, what is modular? Modular is that you have a confined area, for a task, and you have defined interfaces, how this module is working with other modules, so if you have a shipment model, you have a production model, and when production gives it to shipment, what happens in this interface. And you can easily, if you have defined this interface, you can easily use another model to plug in and make sure production gets rid of their finished goods. And the third structural thing is diversity. So and diversity is something, you have to have heterogeneous environment, diverse people, diverse markets, diverse products, diverse supply chains, you name it. And then you have the capability to struggle a little bit with the modules of the diverse things, and you have redundancies, because what you can do with this module and this kind of people, you maybe better do in other situation with these. And if you're not able to juggle around, you are not resilient. So these are the three structural things.
Diversity is a great point, Thomas, and I agree that, unless you don't have diversity, and you said in diversity in every aspect of handling the chaos, diversity in the skill set, diversity in the solutioning, diversity. And there's a great point to handle the control. I think so this framework which you have shared here make lot of sense. And Thomas, here, I'm sorry to cut you in between. I hope you don't mind. And some this framework called business model canvas. So this very popular model, business model canvas, where we have these nine building block of strategy. And I think so, if such framework, where these 9 elements of business model canvas are nothing but key partnership, resources, key activities, the value proposition, customer satisfaction, customer segmentation, so the channels, the cost structure, the revenue streams. These are the 9 building block of every strategy. And I have personally experienced, Thomas, that if we have this kind of framework, of course, there are many other tools, such as value stream mapping, balance scorecard, OKR, objectives and key results. There are different ways we can control the chaos. Okay. But I want this very popular model, business model canvas. I really found these 9 building block of every strategy. If we can create that canvas and if we can have that canvas into our strategic room, into our war room or into our any kind of boardroom, if we define how, and Thomas, do you agree that partnership play very important role, even handling the chaos, handling the disruption, Thomas?
Yeah, but partnership plays is a kind of diversity.
Absolutely.
You don't have really your own cultural opinions in your group, but you also have other outside things. And I agree. So the business model canvas is a good way to a good model of a strategy. Nevertheless, the actual strategy has to be very unique and depending on the circumstances and the history and everything. What I was talking before was not really how to build a strategy, but how to build your resilience.
Resilience, absolutely. No, those things are really great, Thomas. Absolutely, yeah.
And I think regardless what kind of strategy you are cementing or formulating, it has to be implemented and it will be disrupted. And then you have to be to have a strategy that is resilient in itself. And this is not a part of the canvas. The canvas is describing the let's say the static structural things, what you're doing. But the dynamics and behaviors are more in the culture,
Absolutely.
Strategy and culture together, as I said before, you have the rational thinking in an organization and the humans behaviors, and you have to balance both of these to overcome
this chaos. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's absolutely true. You rightly said, sometimes you have frameworks, sometimes you have tools, but unless we don't work on the culture, unless we don't work on the structure, we don't have those aspects, maybe no model or no framework will give you a control to handle the chaos. And that's absolutely true. Actually, the tools always exist. And I think so everybody knows the tools, even, to identify the stakeholder, even to, identify the risk. But the problem is, the cultural barriers. It's not that there's a lack of knowledge. I think so. There's a lack of structural approach, the cultural aspect, and some more principles that drives the business. I think so. Those are the aspects make a great way to handle the chaos, Thomas. That's a great point, which I can definitely understand. That is not the framework, but how that framework can be inculcated into the organizational structure, how the people can be trained, how the cultural shift can be bring, how diversity help you resolve these disruption in the portfolio. So thank you for sharing those great approach to handle those chaos, Thomas. Yeah.
Well, regarding culture, maybe I share an experience I had from my outsourcing to India. It was not this company I talked about. It was previously.
Okay.
I worked for IBM clients. It was IBM clients. It was Panasonic from Japan, and they have a division in Europe. And I worked for this division and as an IBM project manager, and we employed a team of 120 people in Pune. Which did some application maintenance, I explained before. So now something happens. So a bug comes up in the system and it is sent to Pune and they fix the bug and it comes back. And after 2 weeks, the same bug comes up again. So it's fixed in a temporary manner. It's fixed very quickly in a temporary manner, but it's not fixed thoroughly. So it's not really a long-term fix. Now, there's a cultural difference, and if you might know Hofstede with the cultural dimensions he's saying, so that he's comparing countries, and it's a little bit contentious if he's right or wrong. But one big difference between Germany And Japanese and Indian is the long-term orientation. So,
Right.
when Germans are doing something, they want to do it thoroughly. And a Mercedes-Benz should run for 40 years, and same with the Japanese. And forever design they are doing. While in India, it's more, okay, we fix it, it's done. And if it comes back next week, bad luck or whatever. But it's not in our culture that we intend to do something that is there for 100 years, because maybe it doesn't play a role in your daily life anyhow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So maybe that. But
So, Thomas, I'm sorry to cut you here. I want to ask you this question which coming to my mind right now. That sometimes it depends on the management pressure where maybe it's not that may be good observation you may have, but I feel sometimes giving the some temporary solution maybe the need of the hour and maybe then working for a longer period. But that is also cultural aspect because quality is a top down. How management do they really want some temporary quick fix or they want it a long-term solution? And see, in India, and I'm from Pune, what I feel sometimes when I also handle some of the quick problems into some of the projects, sometimes the customer really asks us that you give us the immediate solution, quickly fix this particular problem. Probably we have our long-term solution. We will try to derive ourselves, but you give us the solution so we can handle the temporary disruption. Maybe that could be some reason.
well, it's a valid way to if management is aware and you are aware of the situation, then the valid way to start to have a quick fix and then have a long-term fix. But in this case, it was
Got it. Yeah.
an assumption on both sides.
Yes.
On the Japanese and German side, assumption if we have a fix, it will be a permanent fix. That will survive
Yeah.
for the next 20. And on the Indian side, it was the assumption. It was not really a matter of consciousness on both sides to ask, do you want a long-term fix or a short-term fix, or to give the instruction. So only, when this problem came up, we discussed this and we found, okay, it's a communication problem, but it's also a problem that, what is the default thinking in each culture, because you're living there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And so I always, after that, and after other experiences, I always, when I had a new team with different cultures, I did a 2 days workshop on cultural awareness. It's not that we solve all the problems, but the point that has to be made that the other guy might think totally different in this area, and you have to be aware of it. And then if you're aware of it, you can have examples which makes it more vivid. And then the last step is to leverage it, because if you as an Indian manager, if you want to have a quality assurance guy, maybe you ask a German to come in and scrutinize your work. And you will get some wins, or otherwise around. If you want to have a quick fix, then you ask an Indian to help you with a quick fix. So, but only if you know that these differences exist in the mindset, in the behaviors, in the perceptions, then you will have this opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think so, Thomas. This is a framework we have discussed in segment 2. Let's move on to segment 3 of this particular podcast. And here in this segment 3, I just want to talk about some real world example where you have successfully. Of course, you gave some example already. And how a real portfolio where you saw some chaos, you saw a lot of disruption because of maybe technology, because of maybe the lack of diversity, you said, or maybe because lack of cultural resistance and cultural issues, and I think so. Let me start, Thomas. I was part of a banking portfolio, and in a banking portfolio, cyber security threats create a lot of chaos because we handle customer, and so this is the real world example where there are a lot of chaos because of cyber threats. When I was part of this one banking portfolio, and we really saw, these hackers, these attacks, they want to steal your banking data. There are a lot of chaos we have seen when I was part of this banking portfolio. And some of the solution which I could recollect at that point of time into this cyber attack into the banking portfolio were some kind of involving, of course, not just about hardware where you work on your firewall. It's not just about work on your routing logic or your all your logical rules. It's not just about revalidating. Of course, I started first thing is revisiting and kind of, but what the solution first we discuss is we ask the VAPT, the vulnerability assessment and the penetration testing. We just asked our, because we had a VAPT team, the vulnerability assessment, and so we asked them, how can somebody penetrate so deep into our system? And when we are already doing the VAPT, why these hackers, why these spammers, how can they go so deep? The problem, what I found that point of time is we had this particular team, but even again, this cultural issue. I'm also linking it to the cultural issue. Again, you have a framework, you have a team, you have a certain role who have to do proactive things, because we need to everything handle proactively, identify the risk proactively, identify this chaos proactively. That's the best strategy, which I believe, rather than let the chaos happen and then you start. So we had this team, but this team was never ready for, or they were never too serious about those real work. Again, it's a cultural problem. The seriousness were never there they never expected. They always believe that, okay, they have certain firewall rules. They always have certain multiple kind of multiple kind of stages where they have to go through. But these people were able to penetrate too deep and able to create a problem. And then the solution came with where we, of course, the business continuity solution, we always came up with, of course, we have the DR, the disaster recovery solution. We have the near DR. We created, not just we had a DR, the disaster recovery, which is equivalent to our primary data management and data center, but we had a disaster recovery, which is, kind of equivalent, same data was replicating a real time, but we also had a near DR where we could create another level of business continuity if another, so, there are different way, of course, we instructed our different VAPT team, the vulnerability assessment and penetration team to handle such banking related, because it was very, very important when so much of customer transaction, and there we have zero tolerances. And today, Thomas, I think so technology is also creating a biggest disruptor, I think so, in any portfolio. Do you agree that, Thomas? Can you share your experience where technology created the disruption and how you handled the technology disruption, and what could be some solution around them, Thomas?
Yeah, what you explained, Kailash, is that you have some security breaches, and this is a common problem that is coming up, even with AI more, and it is targeting a lot of not only banks, a lot of normally companies, and even companies can go broke if they don't respond quickly. And there are consultants looking at this data security problems, when they come in and analyze that. I think that is not at all a portfolio management problem. This disruption. It will disrupt everything in the company, also the portfolio, but also other things, It is something, and, I was on the board of PMI.
Yes.
Actually, we had exactly this kind of discussion in the board of PMI. What is if people steal our data or whatever, break in our system and do that, And so there is then the reply is on the board level, to make sure first we have a risk assessment. So there is a risk management exercise, and we have to have somebody who's in charge of risk and, prioritize these risks. And then what should the organization do? And then we have established something like the internal audit, which is also on the organization level, reporting into the board. And then we have a department dealing with risk, and we have external partners and changes in everything, in the infrastructure and in the portfolio, for sure. These projects implementing these measures that came up to the portfolio were selected because they were deemed a high priority, but not a high priority in terms of ROI or whatever, because the board said so, because the board said that. And why is the board saying so? Because the board has a personal responsibility to let the organization survive, and anything that attacks the organization in their survival chances, the board might be personally liable for that. So they are very much interested in this threatening environments which are coming from cyber, but also from other things. So I think the portfolio will be affected in the end. Maybe the portfolio when something occurs, like you mentioned in disaster recovery, something, then maybe the portfolio will be obsolete, because you can stop everything if you don't handle this. If a bank is not able to use the systems for a week, they are dead. Anyhow, and many other companies too. Most of them are on the internet now, and doing virtual things and online things. So without being able to be on the internet and to communicate with customers, suppliers, members, whatever, you are dead anyhow. Yeah. So that is a life-threatening thing, and portfolio would be the last thing I think about when I want to solve this.
Yeah. And I think so. You pointed out audits, and I think so. Can I correlate it with governance? So can I say that governance is very important to handle this chaos and to control this chaos, Thomas?
Yeah. Well, you have a governance system; it's established.
Yeah.
Now it hopefully supports your strategy. Hopefully, not always it does. So there's sometimes a break between strategy and governance, because strategy is easy to change, but governance, there are passes that are maybe there for 50 years. It's hard to change this kind of governance decision-making, power structures and what you have. But governance certainly is a big deal. I appreciate that when I'm in a program, that I can first, I'm part of the governance of the organization, and there are decisions made. But also within my program, I have to establish a very good and appropriate governance system. Then I'm the owner of that as a program manager. It can be a little bit outside of the overall organization government, because I maybe need to do something that is not normal to the organization. As you can find out, I'm more a friend of program management as a means to develop, then I'm a friend of formal portfolio management. Both are needed, but the importance of program management, I think, is much, much higher.
No, absolutely, Thomas. And if I understand correctly, you also said something about risk. And when you gave example of when you were member of the PMI board, and there were you said you always threats. There were always uncertainty because of the data leak, and I can understand that in being I'm myself holding 5 PMI certification, and even today, Thomas, I think so. You may be also aware of when the remote exams are happening, we are seeing a lot of such problems. So what do you think? Did you also had this kind of discussion when you were in the board? How to protect those, because you will lose the of course you have a third party vendor, the Pearson. Pearson is the exam partner for PMI certification, whether it's a remote proctored or physical proctored exam, but there always will be how governance aspect of these. How are you managing these these vendors which you were dependent in your portfolio or into your initiative, and the chaos related to vendor itself, because it may not be the organization at the Pearson level, but it will be that branch level. There may be malpractices where they may be leaking the data. How is it controlling those chaos is your strategy toward that, Thomas?
Well, I cannot actually comment on what the board thought or decided, but I can tell you it was on the slate of discussion on the board level. This kind of exam security, what would you normally do? You would look at each environment differently, because the fraudulent options in each environment are different. If you look at China, India, Africa, whatever, you might have a different assessment as if you go to and Europe, And so it's, I think, a very dedicated thing you would do. And also maybe you have different options to ensure. So you could stick with paper and pencil exams, for instance.
Yeah.
And you could audit the provider more in other areas.
Right.
So you will certainly monitor these kind of breaches in exam data, but you will also try to implement ways how to mitigate this risk. And you see these ways, in the exam itself. So I think nobody today gets the same exam.
Yeah.
The other one, questions are always a little bit shuffled, and so there is no way in looking at the neighbor's thing and then do that. And then you have all these proctored exams when you are videotaped. So it's not easy, but it's a way that you feel observed and that you feel controlled, and maybe you have to step up your ways to cheat somehow. And
Right.
it's not always the provider. I think the provider is doing the best as they can, depending on their level of contract they also have. If you can have maybe 99% of security, if you pay a high price, and then the provider can do that, or you can say, okay, for this country, 80% security is sufficient because we observe what's going on, and then, And I think what is at stake for PMI, especially with the PMP, is the point that, is it trustworthy if somebody has a PMP, And I would even say it's trustworthy, but, is this person in the position to run any projects you have? No, because that depends on your circumstances, on the context of the project, and you only can run projects successfully if you have a lot of experience in this area. It's not up to a certificate. A certificate can give you some certainty about the knowledge of this person. Maybe that he, and in the case of PMP, it's for most people, it's really a very severe exam. If you compare it to other exams, Prince 2 or whatever, that's easy peasy. But for the PMP exam, in my experience, I say you have to plan for 200 plus hours of learning. And that's not the case for other simple exams. But there are even more difficult exams on the field. But PMP is at a good level, not exorbitant difficult like the PGMP, compared to PMP is much, much more difficult.
Absolutely.
And you see it from the number of people who obtained the PGMP, still less than 10K. And so we have 1.5 million PMPs, who the favorite is here.
Absolutely. Thomas, let's quickly touch upon the human element in disruption management. See, I have always believed strong team turns volatility into victory, and your leadership play a very important in this team management. Then your team can turn any volatility into the victory for your organization. I want to ask you, Thomas, how the leadership and the team dynamics in managing the portfolio disruption, how that will play a role there.
Well, it's a big topic that maybe deserves to be discussed as an extra or even
I know.
in a series of things. Leadership, leadership training and leadership development is a huge sector of economy in the training business. And all executives, all managers, all project managers, experience that, So if I'm a leader and project manager, I think what is of utmost important is to develop my emotional intelligence. So develop myself.
Absolutely.
Become a better leader, to be more resilient, to be more respected by the team, and to be more cognizant of what the team thinks. Emotional intelligence is a part of it, Empathy, is a part of it, But also to persuade, to influence others is also the other part. If you are not emotionally intelligent, how can you convince others that you have a vision that is worthwhile following? And even how do you make these decisions that are easily respected as a relief and not as a threat by the people? So that's, I think if you start becoming a leader, emotional intelligence is what you should look at. And there are a lot of classes, ideas in doing that. And if you are a leader in a multi-language, multinational, multicultural environment, I think in India you have the benefit of being a very diverse country by yourself.
Yes.
Different nations in yourself and religions and whatever, and I appreciate that. You are experienced. So, but also, we Germans are also a little bit adapted to it because in the last 50, 60, 70 years, we were very good in exporting. So, and you can only do that if you go out and sell stuff to everybody in the world, So you have to be at least listening to them, what they need, and then providing some long-term solutions, which they appreciate because it's stable. they only pay once and not 3 times a year, for that. So cultural adaptation is important in our global world, and I think cultural adaptation is only possible if you are aware of cultures. I recommend to look at Hofstede's Erin Meyer. There are some Fontana, some authors that are talking about culture. I think Hofstede is the easiest access. By the way, former IBMer, so he developed this system in the 80s of last millennium. Then, again, if you look at strategy and strategy implementation, so if you move from your idea of a strategy to implementation, this path is called transformation. I transform my organization from a status quo to a status to be. And this transformation, I think, is very well captured in how to do it by the transformation compass by the PMI. Well, these are some thoughts around that human nature of
So Thomas, there's one question coming to my mind. There are a lot of emotions flowing throughout these different initiatives in the organization. And you rightly pointed out, understanding not just the others' emotions, but controlling your own emotions sometimes play a very vital role in controlling this chaos which is happening in the organization. Today, in one hand, we have the emotional intelligence, and on the another hand, we have artificial intelligence. Now, how, if I ask you that, artificial intelligence is creating lot of disruption, lot of chaos. We have DeepSeek coming. We have, of course, they have disrupted the disrupted the way the organization do the thing. Disruption in this chaos created by such artificial tool. I think so. Emotional intelligence is the one solution this disruption, Thomas.
Yeah, I think emotional intelligence is, in any case, a tool or a technique to make you a more conscious human. But beware, if you look at artificial intelligence, there are also coming up a lot of emotional artificial intelligence tools. So, which I saw even 20 years ago, I saw a video from a Chinese class of students, and there was a video camera observing them. And then the point was to make sure they understand when they are not paying attention.
Yeah.
So, this is already a part of how to read people, and that is how to read emotions. And I think artificial intelligence can do that. And in China, they develop things. But also, if you look at the Western intelligence, if it's MI6 or if it's CIA, or the Israelis are very big in developing tools to understand human emotions and to look at the crowd of people and know this guy is angry, This is happening already, and we have it. So I installed 5 years ago. So I installed it. It's now a tool which is now no longer available, but it has been somehow consumed by other tools. And this tool gave us a assessment of a team while they are discussing things in the meeting, and then the assessment would be who is leading the discussion, who is maybe not paying attention, who is, and then gave you a team moral index from that discussion. And if you do this over some time, you get a very good idea who is supporting the team, who is maybe needs some guidance to better support the team, if you want that, This is already there. And I'm not sure. I'm not using it so much, but so if you are in an organization who is maybe not really ethical, and then you do this without consent, it's certainly unethical. Apply these kind of tools without consent, and who would be consenting to the fact that he is analyzed by an AI to improve performance of the team? Not many.
Yeah. I think that's a great, line of, thought, Thomas. And, I just want to, continue from here. And I want to ask your view on future trend or how innovation in portfolio management. I always believe, we need to anticipate, we need to adapt, and then we need to achieve. And in portfolio management, innovation is very, even when I see the balance scorecard, there is one dimension of balance scorecard is about, of course, we have financial dimension, we have customer centricity, we have business process improvement. But another dimension of balance scorecard, which I always have, the learnings, the innovation. This is a very, very important to manage the organization strategy and so on. So I want to ask you what kind of future trend or innovation you are seeing in the managing the portfolios and program and making the organization more resilient from this chaos, Thomas?
Resilience, you mentioned just, it's about the organizations to be resilient, but it's also about the humans in the organization, the employees, the C-suite, whatever, that they are resilient. Because if they are not resilient, they respond to chaos with, chaotic emotions, with fear, with whatever, with decisions that are not optimal or not appropriate. Let me put it this way. So resilience is certainly something you should think about and look about. I do some workshops on how to build resilience, and one of the ways is how to build your wisdom. There are some 10 competencies that make up wisdom, and you can build on that. And in India, you have this Buddhism and Hinduism things that always give you some ways to think about yourself, improve yourself, be more ethical and all that. And that helps a lot. This is not so much the case, let's say, in the US and in Europe. So the other thing is, I think we are in the Western world. I'm not sure about India, but some Indians, we are too much focused on rational thinking, on the decomposing of problems, putting into bits, and then think, okay, we improve all the bits, and then the whole thing will be improved. While we know that's not the case. We have the case of systems thinking, which is looking at a more holistic way
Exactly.
at a system and problem, and and tries to balance the chaos, not bring chaos away, balance chaos and control. Some things we can control for our benefit, and then sometimes, like in the river, we are jumping in and swimming. Sometimes we are just accepting chaos and enjoying chaos. So chaos is not bad. Enjoy chaos, because without chaos, there is no life, and you are not living, and you are not progressing. So if you are the opposite of VUCA, it's a great. So if nothing is volatile, nothing is uncertain, nothing is ambiguous or uncertain, then you are the graveyard. Yeah, you are down 5 feet down. And so I think this system thinking and the holistic thinking is a very important way of thinking, critical thinking. And what helps me personally a lot, I think, is, to be honest, Chinese philosophy. So if you look at Taoism, Taoism is the teaching about the way to go forward. What we do in portfolio management, so we describe ways how to go forward, processes,
Yeah, absolutely.
but Taoism does not recognize a goal overall. So we in the Western world, we have always the thing we have to reach a goal. Chinese don't care so much in this Taoism thing, So the goal is not important. The importance is that at the end you are embedded in the chaos, increase the value and the potential of things. And that's why you focus on the how to do things. But the what will be seen if it's there, And I think that's very interesting, because it also gives you a differentiation between projects and programs. Maybe not in the standards you can read. The project clearly has a goal. It's defined by a goal, and the project has a time constraint, starts and ends. A program doesn't need to have a goal, because it's about benefits, and benefits is value, and value is not a goal. Yeah. Value is what you perceive at the moment when it's there. So I'll give you an example about a nice program you might not know about. Really, it's the Spanish Inquisition. That was when the Spanish king said, okay, we will only allow people in our country that are Catholic.
Okay.
So it was invented to get rid of the Muslims, to get rid of the Jews, of the Protestants, everything. And this Spanish Inquisition was a program set up 1400 something by the Spanish king, and he got approval by the Pope. And this program ran for 350 years. And is still impacting the Spanish culture. And I read another paper. He said, we know in which cities the Inquisition was doing their trials. And in the end, they burned people. That was the final target, and that instilled fear. And they can tell you if you have a city where a lot of these trials went on over 350 years, still today, this city is economically underdeveloped. It's a cultural long-term thing. So this is a very extreme program, but the the effects are benefits for the kingdom still alive today, and benefits for the people and but it is the perfect example of a program. When you set up something, you have a governance model, you have expected benefits for the kingdom and for the Pope, not for the people. You have lots of projects, you have integration of all of this, you have monitoring and everything. So if something is a good program, that's
absolutely. I think so. You rightly said value is perceived, and this is what even I have learned from the PMI standard. Benefits are maybe more tangible, maybe more easily quantifiable, and can be delivered during the program life cycle, and continue to sustain it. But value you will only realize when they will be operational. When and value is perceived because it's in perception, and the same benefit may be perceived differently by different stakeholders. And that's a great point, Thomas. I think we had lot of discussion, and finally at the end of this podcast, before we sign off, before we leave, just final few actionable advice to handle the disruption in the organization.
Well, I think first, stay proactive.
Absolutely.
Be in charge of your life and your development. Learn. Don't quit learning. Learn everything. Extend your reach.
Yeah.
So this gets to the point of modularity.
Right.
Having diversity in your life.
Yeah.
And extend your network.
Yeah.
But in the end, at the end of your life, all what counts is the people you know. You have a family, you can be grateful, but if you are alone somewhere, you need your network and everything. So stay proactive in extending your life and learning new things and doing new things, traveling if you can. Second, I think, we just discussed about a little bit about leadership. And I'll subsumize this under become a good person, ethical person. Because if you're ethical, falls back on you. If you are good, you will have good, at least. Then, if you are doing bad things, if you're killing people, maybe think about that your whole life and will be a bad thinking in the end. Be ethical, develop your emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
And learn how to control your emotions. One of the things, learn empathy, learn to influence people. And if you influence people, then you need your ethical thinking, because maybe it's not good to influence people if there are bad consequences for them or for you. So avoid this. This is basically the two advices: stay proactive, develop yourself in an ethical way.
Absolutely. I cannot forget what you said some time back is, the best advice I have taken from this discussion, Thomas, is enjoy the chaos most importantly. I think that's the, so then only we can learn more. Unless we don't, enjoy those chaos, unless we don't take it positively. And you rightly touched upon those point of culture. We need to build that culture where we do not get disturbed by these chaos. Do not think chaos are always wrong, but they are the things where it is the biggest opportunity for you to learn more and build your strategic orientation, build your leadership. And you rightly said these actionable advices. I think so, be proactive, develop your emotional intelligence aspect, and be the stakeholder and customer centric things. I think these are some of the great pointers which I am taking from this particular session, Thomas. And I think so this community who going to revisit this session going to definitely get enlightened by these discussions. Thomas, thank you again. It is a great pleasure to host you, as my guest into this P3M podcast. So, and, a lot of learning personally for myself and for the P3M community. And I'm also looking forward to have some future discussion, because there's so much, as I said, so many decades of experience on handling aside from boardroom to breakout room. You have been 50 years of speaking experience into international platform where you have, had delivered your insight. And I think so, the community will get a lot of value from the other discussion with you. So thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas. Finally, I want to talk to my community at the end. Thank you for visiting this podcast. So, and thank you for enjoying these every single episode. And this today's episode is one such wonderful episode. I definitely request listen to it. Play it on a Spotify, play it on a Apple podcast. Then for great experience of handling the chaos and how to control this chaos and making the organization successful. Do like and subscribe to the podcast. And thank you to everyone. And thank you, Thomas. Thank you one more time. Yeah.
You, Kailash.
Thank you. Yeah.